I'm going to present Ron tonight because I've known him a long time, and I always wanted him to come share his passion of history with us, and finally got him to do that. And he came yesterday to set things up, and he said he was nervous. And I said, I can understand that because he said he gives all kinds of presentations and it doesn't make sense. Then he said something that kind of started making me nervous because he said, in advertising, every word counts. so I'm thinking everything I say is going to be like, really matter. And so basically, I'd just like to introduce Ron Foth Jr. is the president of Foth Advertising, which was I call it a family business because it's started by his dad, and he already went through some of the clients. So you've heard of a lot of the different things they do, and one always comes back to is safe like repairs, safe like replace. And I always got a kick out of a couple of years ago when Gracie was playing basketball at Liberty High School. They did a commercial at Liberty High, and the entire crowd was Fothies. So
just like tonight.
So anyway, also I'm proud to say that you were probably the first person that was on TV the day before that they came to speak here. I don't think that's ever happened for the Powell-Liberty Historical Society before, but Ron, for the 5th year in a row, was on Good Day Columbus yesterday talking about the Super Bowl ads.
Commercials.
And I didn't get to see this year's yet. I'll have to catch
it online. I'm more nervous for this than that.
But I remember he probably made some predictions yesterday that crypto is going to be down, and the fortune doesn't necessarily favor the brave, which was that was last year's commercials. And crypto, everybody knows, kind of went down the tube. So, but the reason
good setup, Tim. Thank you.
The other thing he said in past years is the importance of nostalgia in advertising, and I think that's probably kind of fuels his love of history, because you have to know the history to apply to nostalgia. I guess the only thing I say, I think I've known Ron for a long time, and the things that are important to him are his family, his business, and his many interests, and those include presidential libraries, Frederick Douglass, rock and roll, Batman. Oh, yeah. So we're going to have you like every February do a presentation on one of your interests. That's all I have to say.
It's like a eulogy up here for me.
So I'm sure all
us later.
I got a total kick out of the title of the presentation, which just blows my mind. And he's still married to the same woman that he went on the honeymoon with. Ron's on.
Thank you for having me today, everybody. Like I said, I'm a little nervous to do this. Dave and I worked together for a long time. My brother and I have worked together forever, and I do a lot of presentations a year, but I'm a little nervous about this one because I'm out of my comfort zone here talking about history. So you have to bear with me a little bit as I go through this. I love this a lot. I love going to presidential libraries. I've been to 23 of them. I thought that was a lot until Brett told me he's been to all of them but 2, so I felt like a fool then. But I'm going to give you my point of view on it, how I love it, and the things I learned from it. I've named this today, How I Spent My Honeymoon with Martha Washington. And I'll get to that in a minute, but I want to thank my wife because she's still with me, and we did spend our honeymoon with Martha Washington, so it means a lot. But when I say I've been to 23 presidential libraries, I use that a little bit broadly. Presidential libraries I talk about the homes, the museums, all the different things you can go to a presidential library. But the truth of the matter is, there's only actually 15 official presidential libraries, right? 15 presidential libraries, Hoover, and through Barack Obama, and Obama's is building right now. So when I say I've been to 23, I've actually been to over half because Biden, Trump, and Obama don't have one open yet. So I've been to over half the presidential libraries. FDR was the first person to really come up with the idea to have a presidential library. He was the one that thought the papers should be stored somewhere so that people could access them, and the government could have access to the history and different things they might want to tap into and those things. But then, so he's really credit for having the first official presidential library, but they went back and they did one for Hoover too. So it's all the way through Hoover through Obama. And as you can see, Obama's is being built right now. It's going to be pretty spectacular. I can't wait to go to that. In fact, maybe we'll rent a bus and we'll all go there together on the presidential library. Which would be really cool. I know who will drive it. So it's pretty spectacular. It's going to be the first all-digital presidential library, which blows my mind. Then in 1978, Congress passed a Presidential Records Act, called the PRA, which states that any records created or received by a president as part of the constitutional or ceremonial duties are property of the United States government and will be managed by the National Archives. So all these papers now are officially owned by the government. Before that, these presidents could go in, it was personal property, they could destroy the papers if they wanted to, they could do whatever they wanted to with the president. Think how much history has been changed because of things they might have taken away or burned or thrown away. Well, I'll get to that. So why is that important? Well, as you can see here, you might have papers, let's say, in a garage somewhere. You might have them in your safe. Who knows? But these papers are now stored. I gotta go. Okay. Anyway, those two are coming after me for saying that. But you can see why you have to have these stored somewhere, and so that you can access these things, because they're pretty important when you lay it all out. So, I'll go back to this. So I've been doing this I've been going to these for a long time. But when I was a kid, people ask me all the time, were you interested in history when you were young? Did you love history? I was not a good student. My mom can vouch for that, right, Mom? I was not a great student. I learned it later in life, and I told you I worked in advertising. And there was one person that I credit for really getting me inspired to go to get involved with history and understand history. And I have to sort of answer that with a question. The answer is, who is Alex Trebek? I did a promotion with Alex Trebek, what was that day, maybe 25 years ago or so? 25 years ago, and we got to work with him, and we worked with him on a lot of different projects we worked with. And he was doing sort of the first, I don't know if you watched the show, but you see they have video questions sometimes on there. And they were going to when they do the National Convention, they were doing the National Convention, and when they were going there, he asked me, he said, hey, would you like to go to the National Convention with me, and would you like to be part of it? And I said, well, that would be really cool. So we all went to the National Convention, and I was able to go in 1992. I went to the Clinton National Convention and the Bush National Convention, and I'd never been to anything before like that. And it was unbelievable, the confetti and the hype, and it was like a big pep rally. I just couldn't believe what I was at. So I thought, what is all this? So I started reading as much as I could about how presidents become presidents, all the things they go through, all the different things. And my wife, being a teacher, said to me, okay, well, then you should start reading about presidents. Why don't you start with Washington? And I had never read a book like this in my life. I read this book twice, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. I'm thinking all about the different things, how he grew up. You know as a kid all the things you did, but you can't believe this guy was a real person. And when you read this book, I really couldn't believe it. So at the same time, my wife and I got engaged. At the same time, remember that, right? She wants to forget it sometimes, but we got engaged. And she said to me, I'll plan the wedding, and you plan the honeymoon. So I said, okay, that's a great idea. So she's planning the wedding, and she's going through and doing all the different things, and she's planning the wedding. And finally one day I walked up to her and I said, hey, honey, I've got this great idea where we go on the honeymoon. And she says, Hawaii? I go, no. She says, the Bahamas? And I go, no, better than that. She goes, where? And I go, Mount Vernon. And that's the reaction she gave me. She goes, Mount Vernon, where the is that? And I said, Mount Vernon is near Washington. We can go there. We can see actually Washington's place where he was involved. And I read all about Washington coming back and taking his trips and all that stuff. We can go to Washington. So as an amazing human being, she said, let's do this. We'll go to Washington. So we spent our honeymoon in Washington, D.C., and we went to the George Washington on our honeymoon. So that's how I spent my honeymoon with Martha Washington. As you'll see here, I like to pose like the actual presidents do. So you'll see a lot of times I'll pose like this. There's my lovely wife there. Back then, you can see there's a lot of construction being done there, and you'll see that as it goes. She was supposed to be Martha Washington, but I don't really buy her performance there. And there I am with Washington's picture. So we actually spent our honeymoon there, and we toured the thing, we went through everything, and it was amazing. It's an amazing place. Obviously, Washington would come back there during the Revolutionary War times. He'd come back there, and he loved being there. It was tranquil for him. He would just spend all his time there. In fact, a lot of times he wanted to leave what he was doing and just go there and retire there. And you can see this beautiful, the way it looks. It's so beautiful there, and it looks over the water, and the Potomac there, right? The Potomac's there, and you can see how beautiful his house was. And this is after it's renovated. And what's one really cool story they told me about this land was going to be a bunch of condos. But a multi-billionaire of that area heard about this, bought all that land and donated it back and it's now a park. So when people can stand here, they can look out much like George Washington did. And what I love about that is when I would be there, I would think about him. You can almost feel his presence there. You could feel how it would feel to be George Washington, how it felt to look over that water and what he must have been going through during those times of the Revolutionary War. They have so many beautiful things and beautiful, you go through the different dining room and different areas that he lived in. And, and the coloring was really of the time and the ceiling was of the time. And I just love thinking that he was in that room and he and Martha were in that room, whatever they were doing in that room. There's some amazing things too. This is an actual desk they said that he actually wrote on in the house there, which you just can imagine him writing. This is supposedly, and what they told me, this is supposedly the chest that Martha stored all his letters in, that she supposedly burned a lot of them after he had died, whatever reason that was. So you can see there's so many amazing things. They have George Washington's horse there as he rode up on what he looked like later, an actual bust of him. And one of my favorite things are his actual teeth that he had. I know that's what my wife says, ooh. And when I was a kid, I always thought that he had wooden teeth, but they really weren't wooden. They were bones of animals. But could you imagine in the social media world that we live in now, if a presidential candidate had teeth like this and what the comments would be? They'd be more brutal than yours are going to be about me tonight. So anyway, so as we're going through this, you see all this Washington stuff, and I read a lot of things in the book. But as I thought about it when I was there, the one thing they didn't have when I was there was much mention of William Lee. William Lee was his sort of right-hand man, or what they called him. He was a slave that he owned, but he was very involved with George Washington. He did everything for him. He took care of his horse. He took care of a lot of the things. When he needed a new telescope, he would give him that. Many people thought he was part of this, helped him do with some strategy too. No one really knows, but he was a big part of that. But he wasn't really involved in this museum or in this house anywhere. And I was like, being naive, I just thought, okay, well, maybe they just forgot or they didn't want to mention it, whatever it was. And it really never hit me until I went to the next museum that I went to, which was the Ronald Reagan Museum. I love Ronald Reagan Museum. I grew up in the 80s. Ronald Reagan was sort of the icon of the 80s. Like, whether you liked his politics or not, he was the charismatic leader of the 80s. Everybody, and being a young guy there, my friend Todd knows, Ronald Reagan was the man of that time. So, and he has a beautiful, beautiful library. It's just north of Los Angeles, and you can see how beautiful it is. And you can imagine him. When I was a kid, I always remember him out there carrying the wood and chucking the wood around and carrying, chopping wood, riding the horse. He had that regal sort of feeling, very Americana, very Hollywood with the light and how beautiful it was there. You can see he had a lot of portraits of him everywhere. There I am with my son back there, and we went to there and we see him with the Ronald Reagan statue, which is really amazing. And there's all these amazing statues of him all around. They just opened up a new area of the Ronald Reagan Museum with the Air Force One in there, which is pretty spectacular. You get to go in there, right, Ronnie? Yeah. You could go in there, and there's a lot of incredible things there to see and do. And then obviously he's buried there. The first time I went there, Ronald Reagan was still alive and Nancy Reagan was still alive. And then the second time I went there, they had both passed away. And there's just something about the graves to me. Imagine these iconic people are just there. You sort of try to just feel their presence while you're there. This is a really cool thing, a piece of the wall, and he's so iconic for that tear down that wall statement. A piece of the wall is right there when you're there. But what I really love about presidential libraries is trying to get inside the person and try to figure out how they became this person and their background. That's what I love, is just the history of these people. He grew up in Illinois, and his dad had jobs and didn't have jobs, and he was kind of struggling at times. He had a brother, and he had a mom that was very religious and taught him sort of the spiritual way that he had. He was in the service. We all know that he was an announcer for baseball games, and you can think about this, how that sort of trained him to become president and know how to use to entertain and sort of know how important the spoken word was. We all know he was an actor, and he was he was the leader of the union, and that really got him into politics. As a young man, he was a lifeguard. Supposedly he saved over 70 different people. So you can see sort of the feeling of how this president sort of became who he was. He knew how to perform on TV. He knew how to speak. He had a good foundation. He was a lifeguard, so he was really about, people and all those different things. But I was walking through, the one thing I noticed that they didn't have, and I kept wondering, with all these pictures everywhere, they had no pictures of his first wife, Jane Wyman, anywhere. And I thought, wow, why wouldn't he have his first wife, Jane Wyman, anywhere? He had 2 kids with Jane Wyman. Both of them were the Republicans. The 2 kids he had with Nancy were Democrats. So it's kind of weird they would have no pictures of her anywhere. So I went up to the docent and I asked the docent, and I love docents. Docents are my favorite part of the museum. They're amazing, and they should be thanked every time you go there, because they really have a plethora of information they can give you all the time. So I walked up to the docent. I said, excuse me, can you tell me, I'm just wondering, is there any pictures here of Jane Wyman anywhere? And she looked at me and she goes, shh. I went, what? She goes, shh. She goes, Nancy won't allow it. And that's when it hit me. I was like, wow, you're telling me that you can control what's in these presidential libraries and control their legacy and what you want them to be remembered for. So when I started thinking about Washington, I thought maybe they don't want people to really know about this side of George Washington. Maybe they don't. What's cool to know is 25 years later, when I went back, they had a whole section now at George Washington just for the slaves he owned and just for William, which is pretty cool. And you can see how times have changed and how things have changed. I went back to the Ronald Reagan Museum a year ago, and there's still no picture of Jane Wyman. So Nancy's ghost is haunting that place, as you can imagine. Richard Nixon's is the same way. Richard Nixon, you know, the famous shot of Richard Nixon exiting the helicopter, his museum is great. And, you know, I told you I like to pose. There I am posing like Richard Nixon getting off the plane, helicopter. I bet you never did that, did you, when you went there? Yeah. Okay, I got one up on you anyway. So there he is, you know, there I am getting off the plane. And Richard Nixon is, again, that's in Orange County. They just renovated that one too. And you can see they have a huge presidential logo, the presidential seal on the ground. And it's probably the biggest seal that I've ever seen at any presidential library. Amazing entrance when you walk in, Richard Nixon's beautiful painting in the background. What's really cool is it's built on the same piece of land that Richard Nixon grew up on, and that's his house on the piece of land. So you can go to his birth house, which still has some of the furniture, and you can go into the museum. One of my favorite things about Richard Nixon, the museum was, and I love these kind of things, these personalized things that bring these people to life, was these yellow notepads. He was I didn't know this, he was very known for writing on notepads all the time. He would sit back and write his speeches, his thoughts, whatever it is. And the docent told me, you can really get a better sense of who he was from these notepads, and they're all scanned in there, than anything else, any books. And she said, you can actually see where he wrote on the side, that son of a bitch, blah, 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 or that on the side, making notes to himself. But I really love that. But what shocked me was they have a huge area there dedicated to Watergate. And that's really something that, for better or worse, what he's sort of known for is Watergate. Watergate, and you see the dirty trick, and this is in his library. So again, using the docents as a tool, I went up to the docent and I said, can you tell me that you have this big area dedicated to Watergate? I'm really shocked by that. And she said, that's because the grandkids now run the library. When the kids ran and the wife ran it, they wanted nothing. They had very little to do with it. So you can see how things change as we go. President Clinton has an amazing library. It's one of the most technically advanced one you've ever seen. Look how beautiful that is. It's like something you've never seen. There I am standing in front of the library. It's in Little Rock, Arkansas. And Dave, you went to that with me too, right? We went to that together. It looks over the water. It's sort of like in the short, if you guys are familiar with the short north, it's sort of like having a presidential library in the short north in Little Rock. And what's really cool is he has an apartment building on the top that he'll often stay in when he's there. And he has an amazing Oval Office. And the docent told us at the time that he will often come down and give personal tours to people if there are not too many people in there. So imagine whether you like a president or not, if that guy was actually there and he would give you a tour of his place. He had, now Ronald Reagan's library is the biggest physical library that there is, but Clinton's is the biggest as far as stuff. He has the most stuff of any library there is. And he has so many pictures. He makes Ronald Reagan's to shame. There are so many pictures of Clinton growing up, his brother, all the different things he did. But there's one picture that I found really interesting when I was there, maybe, what were we, 12 years ago? When we were there, I couldn't believe when I saw it. It just stuck out for some reason. It's this one. Bill Clinton with Trump and I remember that picture so well. And I remember thinking, because Donald Trump was sort of on that show, everyone knew him as the billionaire. He wrote the famous book, whatever the famous book was he wrote. And I remember thinking, wow, I wonder if that, so, you know, fast forward to now, and you wonder if that picture's still there. Well, Mallory, my aunt's son, went to the presidential library about 3 months ago. And I said, do me a favor, ask the docent when you're there to see this picture. And the docent told her, it's been removed. So you can see how my take on this, I'm in advertising, and our job is to always present brands and make commercials and make things look good and control the way people sort of think about a brand. That's exactly what these libraries are doing. So every time I go into a library, I think, why are they showing this, and why aren't they showing me these other things? And you can see they're controlling the legacy of these presidents as they go through their time, and their families can control it and change it anytime they want. Some of my favorite libraries, as I go through this, my wife and I last year took a trip to Boston. We saw Paul McCartney there while we were there, and we went to some presidential libraries. I always plan these vacations around presidential libraries. So next is Vermont. We're going to Vermont next for Coolidge's. My wife Paula was really into Jackie at the time. She was reading everything about Jackie, and just the fashion trend that she set for that time was pretty remarkable. It's so timeless. So what's really cool about this library is it's very big. You see this huge glass atrium. It's really beautiful. And I love when the libraries reflect the presidents. Clinton's was very technically advanced. Ronald Reagan's was more rustic. His looks like what you would think Kennedy would be in, this sort of like beautiful space. And what we love is there's an actual boat there. And if you can remember back at some of those famous pictures of the family on that boat when they're sailing around, there's the boat. And you can just sort of sense them on that. I love that kind of stuff. And it's built right on the water. There I am. I have to get the shot that proves that I'm actually there. There I am there. But there's a campaign poster for a young Kennedy. I'm in the creative field. I do a lot of writing. Dave and I do a lot of writing, and I really appreciate the written word. And I love looking at these speeches that are so iconic and so famous in American culture. You see these speeches, and this one's the famous one. And to my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Well, you see there's a subtle change. The original one was what your country will do for you, and somebody changed it to can do for you. I know that's a subtle difference, but I love thinking about why this word was changed to that word. So anytime we have a client critique our copy, I'm thinking, well, if Kennedy can be critiqued, we can be critiqued. I love when you go to the Library of Congress and you see some of the written word that Jefferson wrote, and you see on the side Benjamin Franklin making changes to his stuff. I'm thinking, that's pretty badass, you know? One of my favorite things also are these paintings here that kids would send, and they had a whole section dedicated to just these kids' paintings. And there's the famous shot of John saluting his dad with his mother and with Caroline there, and it's just those kind of things. So Kenny's is a really special place. It was fun going with my wife because we love that era. Another one that I love is FDR's at Hyde Park. That was a great one, right? That's a great one. So there I am having tea with the Roosevelts. As you can see there, I'm having tea. And you can see his house. That's the house that he lived in. There's a lot of different, I wish I took more pictures inside there, but I didn't. You can see his house that way. And what I love there is they have a phone there that he would actually talk to Churchill in London with. So there's a Churchill section. They have a whole section of just Churchill memorabilia and stuff with Churchill. And they have the actual phone. So imagine that phone during World War II. He's on that phone. He's talking to Churchill about all this stuff going on. Then last year, Dave and my son and my brother, we went to London and we went to the bunker of Churchill's. And we actually saw the phone that he talked to Roosevelt on the other way. So here we are. And at the time, I think, they have a whole room, Dave, dedicated to, they had a whole room, but they had it took 8 different technicians to make the phone call work so it could go overseas and to have them talk to them. Think how amazing the times have changed, but that was so cool. One of the things I learned, does anyone know, I'm sure someone here will know, why he is on the dime? Oh, I've got you, except for him. Go ahead, Tim.
March of Dimes.
March of Dimes. He was very into the March of Dimes at the time, so that's why he's on the dime. And I don't think he was alive to ever see himself on the dime. So it's kind of sad, though. It's pretty cool. Really quickly, Grant's Museum is in Mississippi. That boggles my mind that you have Grant's Museum in Mississippi, but they said because he was nicknamed the Bulldog, and they're the Mississippi State Bulldogs, that's the justification that she gave me. I think there's more to it than that. I don't know. I love that shirt I'm wearing, Unconditional Surrender. I love that theme of his. Grant's is pretty amazing. It's on the top floor of a library. Dave, again, went to that one with me, too. I dragged these guys to all of them. Mike went, too. So it's on the top floor of the Mississippi State Library, and they built the whole floor for this, and it's really beautiful. It looks like a country club. You go up there, and it's old wood, and it's really amazing. George Bush's is really cool. It's in Dallas, Texas. It's the only one with 2 statues of the president, him and his father. There's my son and there's me with him. Kind of cool. And what's really cool about that, most of it's dedicated to 9/11. And so there's a lot of 9/11 stuff. But there's one really cool area with they list the names of the Medal of Freedom. And on this list, you see all these names. And there are a lot of scientists and people you may not know. You kind of go, I don't really know all these names. But there's one name on there that said Anthony Fauci. And I'm going, wow, 2 years ago, I would not have known who that was. Now people are taking pictures of Anthony Fauci on that list. One of the really cool things about George Washington, though, I don't know if you know this or not, you probably do, but he's a painter now. He does a lot of painting. I'm sorry, George Bush. Yeah, sorry, George Bush. Yeah, George Bush, young George Bush. Well, young George Bush. He's like 70 now, but young George Bush. So yeah, it's there. Very, very young George Bush. Super young George Bush. He paints a lot, and he has amazing paintings in there, and they're all different paintings of different Americans, both political parties, all in there, and they have one section there. It's just amazing, these paintings all around, so it's really cool. The one I really love is John Adams and John Quincy Adams. My wife and I did that too on the same day we did JFK's. What's nice about that, you get buy one, get one free. You get John Adams and John Quincy Adams on the same day. They have a beautiful garden. You start at his birth home, and you go across the street to another home they lived in, and then you drive about 3 miles away and you go to his garden where he lived and where his library was. So if you're ever in Boston, obviously there's so amazing things to do there, but it's really fun to go there. But my all-time favorite one is the one and only Abraham Lincoln. That's my favorite one by far. I love Abraham Lincoln. I love what he stood for. I love the fact he's a vulnerable president. You sort of can relate to him as an everyman. A guy that walks 20 miles to get a book is something that you just got to tip your hat to. He's just an amazing guy. His is in Springfield, Ohio. There I am posing with his family. Springfield, Illinois. Sorry, Springfield, Illinois. See, thank you, Springfield, Illinois. Speaker of when you walk in, you see there's like the way the White House would have looked at the time. It's really massive when you walk in there. It's really amazing. I mentioned that I love Frederick Douglass. They had Frederick Douglass there, and they have a speaker that plays his speech from July 4th, his iconic speech from July 4th. I don't know if you ever heard that speech, but it's pretty amazing. It'll move you, and it really talks about the July 4th from the perspective of a slave at the time. And in fact, I probably have the only birthday party to Frederick Douglass. As you can see, I'll do a shout out to my daughter. She made me a Frederick Douglass cake there and a Frederick Douglass theme. So I'm very into Frederick Douglass. Damon was there for that one, right, Damon? So I'm into Frederick Douglass, as you can see. But so I love the fact that you can sort of touch these guys. You can feel like you're there. You can look at them and you can sense what they're like. And it's the only museum that's really like this. You can see all the different wardrobe that she wore. It's pretty amazing, all the different gowns she wore. And she was kind of eccentric. She would buy 10 of these things for her hair. She'd buy 16 handkerchiefs. There was no rhyme or reason sometimes. And it'd be all the same, like yellow color. There was no rhyme or reason why she would do things, but she would do things. But what's really amazing about this, there's my son. Right? What's really amazing about this library, and what really got me emotional about this, is you take a journey through his life. And it's almost like you're walking through, and Dave, you went to this one too, right? Yeah, right. So you walk through and you get to be inside his life. You go into, there he is in his cabin. You get to go inside his cabin where his father was and his stepmom was. And his stepmom really influenced him the most out of his life and really was the one that encouraged him to read. So you see, you walk through there and you see that. Then you go into another area, and you're walking through this giant area, and you're going through and you see him working as a merchant and selling his clothes and selling things to the merchant, really just trying to make ends meet and become a lawyer. You see him courting Mary Todd Lincoln there as he's courting her, and you really start to, you start getting it's like a movie. You start falling for these characters, but unfortunately, you know the ending. It's like the Titanic. You know what's going to happen here, so you're kind of walking into this whole thing. Then you see this famous speeches with Douglass, and what's really cool is they bring it to life in such a spectacular way. They have speakers on both sides, and you hear Douglass argue, then you hear Lincoln argue, and it goes back and forth, and you feel like you're actually there, which was really amazing. Yeah, simulated. This was probably one of the most touching areas of all. Her son died while he was in office, and he was actually going to give a speech that evening. He was going to give a speech, and you see her by his bedside trying to comfort her and comfort her. And what I love about this the most is everyone thinks of Lincoln, you think of that giant statue, and you think of him sitting there in Washington, and you just always think of this stone. But here he is carrying a toy in for his son. And it really shows the vulnerability of them and how he was a dad and how he was caring for his son and how you just feel so much empathy for him there. And you really pulled me in, and you know this. So as you're walking through this and you're really getting attached to these characters, even though you've known them for your whole life, you start walking out, and there's this dark sort of corner, almost like a Spielberg movie. And you walk down this dark corridor, and it's dark black, and you just hear raindrops. And you see in the distance, it's Mary Todd mourning her son. And you see the rain reflection on the window, and the rain almost symbolizing tears across her face. And you start feeling what she felt like during this whole time. And imagine, while her husband's fighting, doing the Civil War, she's mourning her son. How hard would that have been to do that at that time? There he is working with his team. I think it's probably for the 13th Amendment there. And if I'm right, that's probably Seward there, right? If anybody knows, that's probably Seward there. Secretary of State Seward, right? And he's working out, and I don't know if you've ever seen the Spielberg movie, but the Spielberg movie brings that to life probably better than anything ever. Then you walk into an area, and you walk into an area where he's about to sign the amendment. And when you're walking down this hallway, and they have screens on both sides of these senators, and these senators saying, don't sign it, don't sign it, sign it, don't sign it. And you start feeling like you're inside Abraham Lincoln's head. You feel like what he felt like as he has this tremendous burden on his shoulders of what to do. In the background, you see shadows of the Civil War, the veterans there, the soldiers there, kind of haunting him, and always in the back of his mind. There's a war gallery there. And then, of course, the part that nobody wants to see is you see that moment right that seconds before he's about to pull that trigger, and you find yourself saying, oh my God, don't do it, don't do it. And you want to tackle him, but you know what's going to happen. You go around the corner, and it's that moment. And while you feel it, you can see that how tired Abraham Lincoln looks. I mean, he just finished the Civil War. It was about maybe 2 weeks after that or something like that, a week after that. And he's going to end this whole thing. And you can see him there, and he's about to do it. And you can just see in his eyes. And according to a lot of books, they were sort of becoming closer than at that time. And from what I understand, Grant was supposed to be at this, and he and his wife and Lincoln's wife didn't get along, so he didn't go that night. And then, of course, as you walk around, you see the casket, and you really become emotional doing this. I don't know if you feel that way watching it, but you really become emotional doing this. So when I left there, again, asking the docent a question, I asked the docent, I said, I got to ask you, this is a pretty spectacular place. It brought to life in a way that I never imagined. Who did this? Who organized all this? And she said, the reason it's so great is because they hired the Walt Disney Company to put this together. So when you go ride the magic carpet ride, or you ride whatever ride you're going to Disney, you can think they did Lincoln's too. And a lot of purists weren't really happy with that. But me thinking back as a child, that would have inspired me to love history a little bit more for things like that. So I was really happy with that. But and then I understood why it was the way it was. So that's an epic president. That's an epic library. But there's some really great ones that you can find that are small and more intimate, almost like this feels like a presidential library, a house sort of. And that was the Millard Fillmore house. And Kathy was the docent that brought that to life. And there we are, there, proof that they were all there. Dave actually took that picture. They took that picture. He's not a president everyone knows. I think he looks like Alec Baldwin kind of, actually, if you look at him. But you have to make a reservation to go there. So if you're going to go to some of these, you have to call ahead, because you'll go there sometimes and the door's locked. And you're like, I'm not going to be able to get back to Buffalo anytime soon. This was in Buffalo. So you can see there's a little house. It's much smaller than this. She was an amazing tour. She was very flirty too, which was kind of interesting. But but one thing she had, you never know what's totally true or what's not true. She had this amazing book there, and she had it signed, and it was actually signed by Millard Fillmore. So whether it's right or wrong, I like to believe it is. But there she is with Millard Fillmore. So people say to me, okay, I want to go to Presidential Library. What can I do? Well, there I am at the Millard Fillmore grave site too. And actually, Buffalo is an amazing place to go if you ever want to go there. They have William McKinley's spot where he got assassinated in Buffalo. And it's actually in a residential area. So imagine like your house, and you're backing up and you slam into the Millard Fillmore, spot where he actually got assassinated. It's kind of crazy. It's right in the middle of the suburb. They also have the inauguration spot where Teddy Roosevelt got inaugurated right there. So you can go to all those things right in Buffalo. Ohio is really known for some amazing presidential trails, amazing presidential things. Grant has a whole area down there in his birthplace in Cincinnati where you can go. There's so many incredible things you can do right here. And I can't believe he has not been to the only one that he's not been to with Harding. That shocks me, but I can't believe that. Rutherford B. Hayes is really an incredible one if you want to go. It's really big. It talks a lot about his life. It's got a really big feeling, and it's really awesome. What's really nice about that, if you go at the right time, you can take Clydesdale horses around the grounds, which is a really special thing to do. There I am posing with him in the Civil War, as you can see there. Garfield's house up near Cleveland, it's about 30 miles east of Cleveland, is really a special place too. According to the docent there, and this is something that we've sort of debated, the wife of Garfield said that is the first presidential library, because when he died, she felt so sad that people were going to remember her husband. So she collected all his stuff, put it together, and said she had invited people in, and they like to take credit for having the first presidential museum, not library, but museum. So there I am in the gift shop with the cup. There's Garfield there and his amazing painting. You can see this is where he actually wrote his inaugural address there, which is pretty cool, on the actual desk. I love stuff like that. He was known for giving these speeches on the porches. And what they would do at the time was, because people didn't travel as well there, he would set up times where he would give speeches. The press and different people would come by. He would speak on the porch there, and he would just give his, when he was campaigning, he'd give his campaign addresses right from the speech. Then the next crew would come in, and days later, people would keep coming through. And there I am reenacting one of his speeches.
Okay, Ron, where is this now? You said Cleveland.
This is about 30 miles east of Cleveland. So if you go to Cleveland, it's east of Cleveland. I don't know the exact city, right? Mike was
it was near Cleveland.
Was it? Mentor, yes, Mentor. Yeah. So it's really cool. So we actually were doing a commercial at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We had a break, so Mike and I drove across really fast, and then we did it, and we drove back. And I think we were the only two in there, weren't we? Yeah. What's great about this, when you go to these things, there's plenty of parking anytime you go. And this is kind of a fun thing. This is why I have it in my DNA. My mother, who's here, that's her at Garfield's. What year would that have been, Mom? 1950 something?
60 maybe.
She's exaggerating. Okay, 60. But there she is. She hasn't looked at it, and that's my grandpa. So I thought it was pretty cool that I have a picture of my own mom at a presidential library. It's pretty cool. Finally, I love involving a lot of people and taking a lot of people. So this last year I said to everybody, I said, why don't we all go on a presidential library trip together? I threw in the Canton Hall of Fame, Football Hall of Fame. That got people more interested. So we all took a ride up to William McKinley's. And the thing about William McKinley's, there weren't a lot of things about William McKinley there, but the one interesting thing is that Roosevelt was his VP, so they had a lot of things about that. So you can see I took a whole bunch of my family members there, but I gotta be honest, I don't remember it because we rented a bus and I had about 5 Bloody Marys on the way up there. So the next time I'm gonna go there a little more sober. Damon went with, you can see the whole crew of us in the bus, and there we are in front. You have to walk about, I think it was how many steps did we say? We count them, like 100, 250 steps up to his monument on the top. So that was a fun trip. And finally, if you really want to hit something on the way home, you can go to President Hayes' memorial where his house was, and it's at the gas station. So it's in Delaware. It's about 20 miles, 15 miles.
I could tell you that at least they were nice enough to name the VP station after Stan's birthplace.
Good one. He and I got to take these on the road. He's the GOAT, that's for sure. So if you want to do that, you can do that. So there's so many things to do in Ohio. There's so many things. So I'm just going to, I talked a lot about the docents, and I talked a lot about how much I love the docents and all the different people. So I'm going to end with one more little story about the docents. And when I go to these presidential libraries, the one thing I love to do is I love going in the gift shops. And the gift shops are just they're almost sometimes more fun than the actual libraries themselves. They have everything in there, the books and just all the different souvenirs. And I love, as a marketer, I love seeing how they market them. And, I have the Abe Lincoln socks that I bought when I was there. So I love all that kind of stuff. So I'm in the bookstore. I'm at Ronald Reagan's museum, and this is the first time I went. And I'm there, and there's a sweet little, it looked like my grandmother back in the back, and she must have been a docent. I don't know. I don't want to say anything how old she was, but she was an older person here. And so I'm walking up there, and I go to buy this Ronald Reagan book. I'm saying, okay, I'm going to buy this Ronald Reagan book, and I give her the book, and she scans. That time there was no scan. She punches the number. I give her the cash. She gives me the receipt. So I'm standing there talking to her, and I open up the book, and I look inside the book, and there's an autograph of Ronald Reagan in there, written in ink. And his hand was shaky a little bit. It's shaky a little bit in there. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a real Ronald Reagan autograph. And I said to her, do all of them come signed by Ronald Reagan? And she looked at me and her mouth dropped. And she visibly started to shake. And she said, oh my, I put the wrong books out there. That one's supposed to be back here. This one goes for $5,000. And I'm going, let's negotiate, woman. No, if there ever was a moment in my life where I had the devil on one side and the angel on the other, this was it. So I'm looking at it, I'm going, she's like shaking. So I'm like, okay. So I did the wrong thing. I returned the book. Yeah. So I returned the book, and she said, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your kindness. I want to make it up for you. I want to make it up to you. I want to give you something really special. I'm like, okay, great. That's awesome. So she goes back in the back. I think, is she going to bring back a Ronald Reagan bust? Is she going to bring back, what is she going to bring back? So she comes out, she goes, I've got it. And she gives me a Jelly Belly sampling package. Okay? Because Reagan loved Jelly Bellies, right? She gives me this Ronald Reagan Jelly Belly package. I'm like, you've got to be shitting me here, right, lady? Jelly Belly package. So I say to her, okay, I'm going to go to, hopefully I might have a better chance of going to heaven if I just accept this, okay, fine, whatever. So I get the Jelly Belly package, and I said, I have a friend in the car. Can I get one for him? And she says, we're only allowed to give one per customer. So with that said, I brought Jelly Belly packets for all of you in honor of the docents and Ronald Reagan. And you can take 2 if you like. So pass it around. Everybody gets a Jelly Belly. I want to thank you for having me today. That's my brother David.
Nixon spent the night in Delaware.
You're pointing to your wife like she spent the night? Nixon spent the night? With him?
Clinton spent the night down in Worthington.
Oh, you did?
Right across from Worthington Mall. They've torn that down and they're putting up a new structure now.
One thing I want to show you really quick. This is my favorite artifact of all the President's Library. This is the Ronald Reagan Jelly Belly mosaic, which I really absolutely love. It's about this big. So it's
like thousands, like 30,000, like some crazy number, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It's just a Jelly Belly
This is at Ronald Reagan Museum.
Oh, is it? Because they got another one.
They might, yeah, maybe they do.
Museum.
I mean, if you remember, I love,
Yeah.
because growing up in the 80s, I remember the Jelly Belly almost more than anything. And he would have like Gorbachev there and he'd give him Jelly Belly.
Right.
And when Clinton became president, he brought a jar of Jelly Bellies for him. So it's pretty cool. So anyway, I don't know if you have any questions that he and I could answer. Enjoy the Jelly Bellies. Thank you for having me. This is a really special place. I want to thank Tim.
Well, you know, Kansas, the First Lady Museum, do you guys go to that?
We were going to go there actually. It's right by the Football Hall of Fame, but we hit McKinley's and we hit the. That's pushing it too much for my daughter. I got to tell you, I'll tell you a quick story really quick though about my daughter. So my son has gone to most of them with me. He's a little more open to going to all these things. My daughter's, you got to push a little bit. So we were going to a client function in North Carolina, and there was a big sorority party at her house. But I already told the client my daughter was coming to this. So I said, you're going to have to come to this with me. So we're going to North Carolina. I said, well, look, we'll stay in a great resort when we're going there. Atlanta. We're going to Atlanta. So I said, we'll stay in a great resort. We'll have a pool. We'll go there, and then we'll go this. It'll be fun. So, okay. So we get on the plane, and I wait till the door shuts. And I go, and by the way, we're going to go to the Jimmy Carter Museum where we land. And she goes, what? She's a teacher. She was so mad. She goes, who's Jimmy Carter? I go, you're a teacher and you know who Jimmy Carter is? I'm going to show you. So she is mad as a wet hen. And, she's a college kid. She wants to lay out, go to the pool. We're going to the Jimmy Carter Museum. Now, I can find greatness in all these museums. Jimmy Carter's could use a little bit of help. You know what I mean? There's no statue of him. There's no sign of him. There's nothing for me to pose next to, And he's not the most memorable president, unfortunately. He's a great guy afterwards, but, he's... So anyway, the one so she walks in, and they have a whole thing, and she looks at me, and the only thing she says is, what's with all the peanuts? So there's my Jimmy Carter story for you, my daughter's story. But she made a hell of a cake. Anyway, thank you for having me.
Another questions?
Any questions?
Well, as a thank you, we'd like to present you with this book, which unfortunately is not signed by Frederick Douglass.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Well, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. Tim asked me about 4 months ago to do this. And I'm like, well, I don't have any props. I don't have anything, So he's like, just talk. I'm like, so I figured I'd put a presentation together. Hope it didn't bore you too much. I love this stuff, and I'm very enthusiastic. So if you ever need somebody to drive you somewhere, I can go with you. I'll go. You are my people. Anyway, thank you for the book, Tim. Thanks for asking. Enjoy the Jelly Bellies.